So yes, this is Reicher and Haslam today. It's basically Zimbardo's prison experiment, just more boring. Um, so this was basically a feasibly funded um, follow-up to the Zimbardo prison experiment to try and break new grounds and get this kind of experiment going again, because they wanted it to be more ethical to try and say this can be done, just not in the same way Zimbardo did it. When Zimbardo did the original Stanford prison experiment, um, the participants were dehumanized. Um, the prisoners were mocked, and they were locked up, and lots of things were wrong with that experiment ethically, and that's why this didn't really get done for sort of 30, 40 years, 30 years, 33 years. Um, but yeah, so Reicher and Haslam aimed to do it justice once again by this was a pretty good idea. Basically, BBC funded, they would do the same experiment with the prison environment, and they would have an ethics committee which would oversee the entire thing. So this was to find a reason for behaviours, was to provide data on the unfolding interactions between groups of unequal power and privilege, to analyse the conditions that led individuals to identify with their group and accept or challenge intergroup inequalities, to examine the role of social, organisational and clinical factors, e.g. mood, in group behaviour, and to develop practical and ethical guidelines for examining social psychology issues in large-scale studies. That last hypothesis, that last aim, rather, was to do with the whole Zimbardo thing, I think. Anyway, the methodology was that they took the prisoners and the guards to a studio that had been made up into a mock prison for 10 days. Prisoners lived in lockable three-person cells. Uh, anyway, so the independent variables were changed over time. It was sort of time, because at day 3, up until day 3, participants would be told that there was a possibility of promotion up from being a prisoner to a guard, which was a kind of social permeability between groups. But then after day 3, they promoted one person and locked it off, and no one else could be promoted. But then 3 days later, on day 6, they were told that there were no differences in qualities between the guards and the prisoners, and that they weren't picked based on quality, personal qualities, which they had been at the start. From the start, they had been told that they'd been sort of put into each role by how they uh, behaved, their traits. But day 6, they get told that actually the guards are exactly the same as they are. Day 7 is when they decided to chuck in a new prisoner, trade unionist, which is an interesting choice, but they then took him out, which was sweet, because that guy kind of gave them hope of a commune. He had this whole plan, and then they took that away, which was very strange. Anyway, so originally there would be uh, 15 participants, I think there were 5 guards, 6 guards in the end, and 10 prisoners. Or 11 prisoners. Well, originally would have been 5 and 10, and then a prisoner got promoted, and then the trade unionists came in, and then the trade union left. Unionists left. These these 15 people were chosen after psychometric tests, a full weekend assessment by independent clinical psychologists, and medical and character references, which was very vigorous screening, which actually reduced it from 332 applicants. So every day in the prison they would be daily swabs of saliva taken. They would undergo daily psychometric testing, and that they were also recorded constantly by cameras. They also they used these methods to measure clinical variables like self-efficacy, depression, stress, organisation and compliance, and their social identity, how well they were getting to grips with being a prisoner or a guard, in a sense, how they sort of identified with their role. So in terms of ethics, which is the main thing around the study, prior to the study, it was all submitted to the British Psychological Society Ethics Committee. Then everyone was screened to make sure they wouldn't go absolutely nuts, hopefully. Then there was a comprehensive consent form that everyone had to sign saying that they were willing to do it. Then the participants were monitored throughout the study as well by the clinical psychologists. There was always a paramedic on hand just in case anything went wrong. There were on-site security guards too, and there was an around-the-clock independent ethics committee watching to make sure anything that looked like it was about to go out of hand was kept under control. So basically what they found was the prisoners didn't identify as much until after day 3, where there was that cut-off between guards and prisoners. As soon as they became divided completely, prisoners they started identifying with who they were more, because they started to realise they were not going to be guards, they couldn't be guards. So they faced the fact they were going to be prisoners, and then they really got to grips with that. They became uncooperative, because there was no way they were going to go up anymore, and they started to organise with each other, they started to work together, really, as a group, whereas guards didn't really do that. Guards didn't group up as much. Some were troubled by the idea that groups and power are dangerous. They were reluctant to exercise control. So yeah. Anyway, after I believe it was day 7. Yeah, after day 7, when they introduced the trade unionist, the prisoners broke out basically, and then they started the commune, which was peaceful and wonderful. And then a few days later, just before they had to stop it for ethical reasons, a few matters. I'm going to take that back. A few participants decided that they wanted black berets, sunglasses. They wanted to be a new guard, sort of regime, a new regime over the others, with all of 2 or 3 days left. And luckily that was stopped, because the ethics committee realised how bad that would have been. So basically they concluded that the guards didn't develop shared identity, but the prisoners certainly did. And that the path they took to reach a similar conclusion to the Stanford prison experiment, the path wasn't the same. It was very different. They took a very seemingly peaceful route until that final twist at the end where it went kinda strange. So yeah, I think that's kind of that.